Ireland is full of ghost stories, and one of the most famous of them all is the story of a ghost who returned to the living world with the sole intention of righting a wrong. What makes this ghost story so famous and memorable is because James Haddock was acknowledged and celebrated by the Bishop of the time, Dr. Jeremy Taylor. This gave the story a very strong foundation to be passed down through the years as an Irish ghost story. James Haddock was a farmer who lived outside of Belfast. James died in the year 1657, but after his death, his spirit had returned to the land of the living to avenge those who did him wrong. James Haddock had made a will that those who should inherit his manor house and farm were his wife Arminel. His young son John Haddock was to receive the rest of it once he reached the age of 21. Mr. Davis was the name of the executor of James's will. Davis married James's wife Arminel a few years after James's death. It was then was the start of the reason for James's spirit to start his haunting, as after James's death, Mr. Davis changed James's will where he put his own son as the beneficiary instead of John Haddock, who was the rightful heir. Davis would have got his own way only for the haunting of James Haddock. It started one night during September. James's friend Francis Taverner was on his way home to Hilborough. Nothing was out of the ordinary until suddenly his horse stopped on the Drumbridge near Brumbeg. Taverner wondered what was wrong, but didn't think much of it, so just got off his horse and led him across the bridge. Suddenly he got a start when he saw a figure in a white coat appear right in front of him. Francis couldn't believe his eyes because the white figure in front of him looked exactly like his friend James Haddock, who had passed away 5 years before. Francis was shocked to the core when the ghostly figure begged him to make sure his son was the rightful owner of the land that was due to him. Francis refused and jumped on his horse and raced away like a racehorse. Francis heard a very strong wind and screeches almost like a banshee when all of this was happening. Francis was happy to arrive home, and as soon as he did, he fell down on his knees and prayed to God to protect him from whatever he just saw. The next night, Francis still wasn't over the shock of seeing his friend's ghost when he suddenly saw him again, as he was sitting by the fire with his wife. He was disappointed his wife could not see the ghost, and wondered why. James Haddock begged and pleaded with Francis that he has to go to his wife to persuade her to make sure his son gets what is due to him and what is rightfully his. He begged for him to make sure justice was done and to right the wrong. Francis once again refused to offer any help, and due to it, he was visited by James Haddock's ghost every single night for a month. Francis was in a very bad place and knew he had to get away from it all, so he fled to Belfast. But to his horror, the ghost had followed him. He didn't know what to do. The ghost was getting more and more aggressive and was now demanding Frances go back to Arminal and punish her in the worst way for her terrible treatment of their son John. Frances was shocked and scared more than ever, as the ghost warned him that if he didn't do what he was told, there would be extreme measures taken. Francis Taverner knew he had to confide in someone and couldn't think of anyone else to go to for help besides his local chaplain. Francis explained the whole story from the very first time he saw the ghost on the bridge to the night before. When the chaplain was told not long after he had the whole story, he then went to visit Dr. Lewis Downs, who was the vicar of Belfast at the time. The three men went to see Davis to explain the ghost's message and demand. Davis laughed at the men as if he was just told a very funny joke. He refused to make any change to the will and refused to give up any land. After none of what was done so far worked, the ghost of James Haddock had told Francis Taverner to take the matter to court. Francis knew that this would be farcical because 1, they would laugh at the idea of a ghost, and 2, there was no witness. The ghost must have known Francis's worry, as he said, "Don't worry about them not believing you, for I will appear myself in the court. When you are the judge or whoever calls upon me, I shall appear." The court was held in Carrickfergus, and it was under the title "The Court Case to Return the Estate to John Haddock." The opposing counsel mocked and jeered the idea and began to call for James's ghost to appear. He started shouting in a mocking tone, "James Haddock! James Haddock! James Haddock!" On the third mention of James's name, he received a ghostly, creepy, out-of-this-world response. Reports circulated that then, in that very moment, there was a huge clap of thunder, and the courtroom shook as if there was an earthquake. And to make matters worse, a hand appeared in the witness box, and a voice from beyond this world asked, "Is this enough?" After that, the court case was settled almost immediately. Davis left the courthouse, where crowds of onlookers shouted abuse at him. He just wanted to go home, but he never did get home. The reason Davis never reached home is because as he was riding home, he was thrown violently from his horse and broke his neck. It was after this day Francis Taverner never saw the ghost of James Haddock again. The tale of the ghost and everything that came with it was the talk of the town and reached all corners of Ireland. It was then that Bishop Jeremy Taylor put it in writing that the ghost was true. The bishop said that James Haddock's ghost was the only ghost who ever answered a summons in the court of law. James Haddock was buried in Drunbeg Parish church courtyard in the 17th century. It is said throughout history that his tombstone will never ever stand up straight. Even when it is moved upright, it just falls over. To this day, it lies in moss and dirt. Is the reason the tombstone doesn't stand upright a message from James? Is he trying to tell us something?
I spent
Jason was a kleptomaniac since as long back as he could remember. Ever since he could steal, he would. He remembers his mom used to get so mad at him when he was a small kid for stealing different items from his peers at school. His mother didn't experience anything else bad about his behaviour apart from the stealing, although there was one very distressing experience his little brother had when they were both small. They were in the woods and Jason stole his father's gun, and there was a dog that seemed lost. Jason used the gun to shoot the dog dead, and his brother started crying, but Jason just started laughing and said, "Come on, let's get out of here." Jason's brother Simon told his mom Susan, and she grounded Jason for almost a month. But when it came to stealing, he wasn't in the need for anything. He just had the impulse to steal as much as he could and as often as he could. If he was inside a restaurant, he would steal the knife and fork, and sometimes even plate, even though he had many more at home that he stole. He was caught a few times and even spent a few months behind bars when he was 21. He had counselling to try to stop his impulses to steal, but nothing worked. He kept stealing as much and often as he could. One time, he even stole from his own best friend. They were out for a drive. Jason's friend Jack stopped at a gas station to fill up. While his friend was inside paying, Jason stole his friend's phone and put it in a secret pocket in his bag. No one could find it there. As they were driving up a lonely road, they knew that they were in the back of the Beyonds, and there was no GPS in the car, so they were lost. Jack regretted driving so much out into the outback. Suddenly he was startled as a dog stood right in front of the car. The car swerved and crashed right into a tree. Jason got a flashback of years and years and years before when he shot the dog out in the woods. Jason was knocked unconscious and was in a very bad way. Jack tried to get his phone from where he left it on the car's dashboard, but could not find it. Jason was bleeding very badly and could not speak. Jason knew Jack's phone was in his secret pocket, but he could not manage to get the words out. Jack kept looking for his phone to call 911, knowing the paramedics would have to come in at least 5 or 10 minutes at most, or else he would be gone. He knew it was too late when he saw Jason go pale and the blood began to pour out of him even more. Jason died knowing his stealing finally caught up with him. It was Sam's birthday, and he decided to celebrate it with just his sister and parents this year because of how much drama there was at his birthday last year. Sam was having an argument with his parents because they wouldn't allow him on the Ferris wheel, so he got very angry and ran off with temper. He ran outside of the funfair and was walking along the road sulking. He suddenly noticed a car driving slowly beside him, and the window was pulled down. A weird-looking man dressed in a black suit stared right at him with a weird look and said, "You're next." Sam got chills up his spine and turned and ran back into the funfair. He saw his sister with his parents. They were talking to a cop, and Sam's dad saw him and told the cop, and they walked over to Sam. A couple of minutes later, they were all sitting, eating popcorn, when Sam's dad said, "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt you riding the Ferris wheel." Sam's mom looked at her husband and said, "What?" Sam couldn't understand why his parents were so against him riding the Ferris wheel, but he was happy he was going to ride it, so he just jumped up and gave his parents a high five and shouted, "Awesome!" Sam walked over to the Ferris wheel and waited in the queue. When he got to the top of the queue, the man selling the tickets looked down at him and said, "You're next." It was the exact same man in the car. Sam ran away from the wheel and up to his parents and shouted, "It's him! It's him!" Sam's parents both said, "Who?" Suddenly, Sam's dad made eye contact with the man taking the tickets. The man turned and ran, but Sam's dad took chase after him. Finally, he caught him and said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The man said, "You know what happened with this wheel this exact night last year." Recognition came to him right away. It was the father of a kid who shared the same birthday with Sam, and they were at the funfair last year. The man could see it was all coming back to Sam's dad and walked up close to him. In the background, the Ferris wheel was on fire. The people on it were screaming and shouting as they stopped it. The man purposely set fire to the wheel, and it was meant for his son. The man screamed at Sam's dad, "This very night last year, you and your silly wife offered to take my son to the funfair to share his birthday with your son. What did you do? You left him go on this messed up Ferris wheel and he fell out from halfway up. Lucky he has survived, but do you know he has nightmares every single night?" The man got out a gun and pointed it at Sam's dad, but there were several policemen nearby shouted, "Drop the weapon." The man was arrested, and Sam, his sister and parents went home and decided next year to celebrate his birthday at home.